guys, Assalamu alaikum. I am Izeen Fatima, but this video is not about me. It's about something that intrigued me and I have observed, and it affects almost each of our lives. It's about policy and policy making, but in a very different light, and I've thrown in all my special ingredients in it. So stick to the end. So before I start, I'll share some of the snippets on the screen, which is like a teaser for this video, which is like a hook. So here we begin.
पानी प्रदूषण जो होया जो ये कारखाने बढ़ाए गए सरकार ने जो तरक्की कर ली तरक्की से होया है पेपर मिल का पानी जो गंदा पानी जो मिले शुगर फैक्ट्री का पानी आवे इनसे होया.
In a civilized society, we are all kings. We are all policy makers. The world advances when we advance as its passionate keeper. Although the word policy or policy making has always intrigued us, but it has always also seemed far-fetched because we have a very little understanding of it, what goes into it, how it operates, who is affected by it, etc., etc., and hence we move forward with our lives as if it doesn't affect us. But it does. It is like ek anar sau bimar. It will take only one problematic policy to affect thousands of us. Therefore, it's vital for us to understand it, of what goes into the intricacies of this hidden realm. In a world where information surges freely and we believe that we are informed, the truth is starkly different, my friend. We are not. How can we make informed choices? How can we elect the right representatives when we don't know what goes behind the curtain? How can we also make them feel accountable for all these decisions when we don't know what goes into their decision making? We have to know this, and this video is all about it. Through this video, I will be navigating the power dynamics that goes into the decision making and the policy making that I have identified in the light of two factors. First, the power of elite and the operational shelf life of policies. So before we move on to understand the concept of power of elite, let's do a very little bit of imaginative exercise. Imagine a grand stage. Imagine that all these policy makers and bureaucrats have donned their invisible crowns and come onto the stage as magicians, and they're captivating us with all their tricks that manipulates us in ways that we don't even know of, and we are just like fascinated by them. But hold your applause, because the truth awaits for you, my friend. You know, all these other magicians also knows the other magicians' tricks and what goes on behind it, and like it is not real, and we as laymen are just captivated and fascinated by them as if they are really doing magic. It is as if there's a secret language that is whispered amongst only a few privileged people, in this case the policy makers. It is the same, my friend, and this is what the exercise was about. This is what theory of elite postulates. It postulates that the power rests only in the hands of a selected few, in this case elites, who wield influence and shape the course of our collective destiny. Yet how many of us are truly knowing the hidden choreography? So before we move on to something more personal of an example, let me share a snippet from one of my favorite series, Panchayat.
मंजू देवी के पति ब्रजभूषण दुबे जी की बात कर रहे हैं, नहीं समझा? पिछले पंचायत इलेक्शन में सरकार ने सिर्फ महिलाओं के लिए रिजर्व कर दिया था ना, लेकिन ब्रजभूषण जी ठहरे हमारे खिलाड़ी आदमी, अपनी जगह अपनी पत्नियों को खड़ा कर दिए और चुनाव जीत भी गए.
कहने का मतलब ये है कि मंजू देवी ऑफिशियल प्रधान है और ब्रजभूषण जी हैं प्रधान पति. इस पूरे कार्यालय का कार्यभार वही संभालते हैं, तो हम सब उन्हीं को प्रधान जी कहते हैं.
In this video, the theory of elite became very evident. However, there are special seats reserved for women candidates in panchayat elections, and there's a candidate who wins, a women candidate, specifically on paper, but the truth is that behind the scenes it's all controlled and influenced by their husbands. You'll see all these election campaign posters in which there's a large photo of their husband, while there's a teeny tiny photo and the name of the main and the real candidate. This dynamic shows the existence of patriarchal structure and the elitism in the aspect of men being the power holders and the decision makers for their wives. Which makes me come to my second determinant, which is the operational shelf life of policies. Operational shelf life is a term which is mainly used in the pharmaceuticals aspect, for example, in the sense of medicine, syrups, etc. But let's understand it in the aspect of policies. So we always see these new policies coming up with such hype and robust working and advertisements, and they also make all of these jingles which our brain memorizes, like hum do, hamare do, beti bachao, beti padhao, and slowly we feel that they are fading away from our memory as well as their implementation on the real ground. And that's when the end of operational shelf life also comes into existence. The question arises, to what extent, to what time are these policies being run on ground? Has it that they have faded from our memory? Is it the same that they have faded from the on ground aspect too? We need to know. We need to make all of these policymakers and bureaucrats accountable for that too. We could imagine operational shelf life as dazzling fireworks for a brief moment and then fading away, just like that their existence was not even there. So what is the reason for all these short-lived policies? We are in the spiral of just new policy creations and then their expiration. New policy creations and then their expiration. There's no proper aspect of monitoring that is happening in between. There's a gap between the dynamic nature of our world and the sluggish adaptability of these policies into the nature. And this gap is just widening. And for me, I have identified that this is more of a tussle between operational shelf life of policy makers or operational shelf life of policies. I'll ask you a question. If you were a policy maker, what would incentivize you? What would make you feel motivated to do the work? Is it the monitoring part of the policies, or is it working on the new policies which will get you attention, which will incentivize you by alignment with the leadership? And like for the permanence of their jobs, people work really hard that they get a sarkari naukri which is permanent in nature. Obviously, we will also choose the option of working on new policies where the incentives are high, the attention is high, and all of the other aspects as well. I'm not saying it's easy, but we have to start somewhere by revolutionizing this system, by changing this system one step at a time. So before I talk about like the solutional aspects that I have identified of it, let me take on you all guys to a very short-lived timeline of the Nirbhaya Fund. Here, what I wanted to highlight through this Nirbhaya Fund, which was set up after this really tragic and horrifying incident, it was still used as a political agenda by these elites, political leaders in this sense, for their vote banks, etc. And it is really evident that its operational shelf life was short-lived. Now, that being said and understood, the main question is, how do we come out of this cycle? Because whatever that's written in the system, it's really tough for it to be rewritten or to come out of it. So the main question arises, how do we tackle this situation? So for me, the first step should be sensitization. The sensitization of all the policymakers or bureaucrats about the issues that they are working on. Are they really sensitized about the topics or the thematic areas that they are working in? There should be regular sensitization checks through some kind of psychometric system where we know how connected are they to the areas that they are working in, how connected are they to the beneficiaries that they are working for. The second thing which should happen is the conversations. It's not about log kya kahenge. It's about log kahenge to dusre log sunenge bhi. Once people will speak up, the other people will listen and will know that there's another perspective that is shared in the world by another set of people. The third really important obstacle that's coming in is the misinformation. The last census that happened was in 2011, and the policymakers are still making the policies based on that. While our country has moved really fast paced in all these years, the past decade. So we need the census right now. We need the right kind of statistics and information and the demographics of the beneficiaries for all these policymakers and bureaucrats to work upon or to build upon. And now coming to the aspect of government job being permanent and the whole concept of sarkari naukari, how should we handle it? It may be permanent in nature, it may be well deserved, but we should at least have performance appraisals like we have in the corporate world. We should have 360-degree performance appraisals. We should also take the appraisals from the beneficiaries. So this kind of robust performance appraisals should be taken up and applied in this whole sector, which should be done in a regular manner as well. Talking about change, the most difficult aspect of it is it being sustainable in nature. How do we make it? It could be only through the long-term change that a long-term impact could be seen, a bigger impact could be seen, and that could be done through behavioral change aspect, because it recognizes and tackles the underlying motivation, the social biases which influences the individual's actions. And by promoting different incentives and promoting positive behaviors and reinforcement, the last and the most important step that should happen is unification. The unifications of policies. There are a lot of center as well as state policies which are overlapping in nature or are duplicated in the tussle of center versus state, while the most negatively affected people in this whole process are the beneficiaries, are the people who are in need. So this should end. The power of elites should end, and the operational shelf life of policies should be lengthened. And that is how unification of the sense of purpose in the whole country could happen. That's really it from my side. This is not a call to action. This is just a call to conversation.